Well, you've missed a little.
I missed a little.
Or you at least weren't here for some. I don't know. I know you caught some of it while you were not even here, but you weren't here for some of this. So we have been making our way through Daniel. I started to say trucking, but we haven't been trucking. We've been slowly plodding through Daniel. And we are in chapter 7. And last week we got through the dream portion of the book, of the chapter, and we're now ready for the interpretive part of the chapter, the last half of the chapter. But before we start the interpretation, let's real quick review the dream portion so that we know what we're interpreting. So Daniel in chapter 7 had a dream about 4 great beasts. And that first beast, we even got pictures.
All right.
The first beast was like a lion with eagle's wings, but later got plucked, lost those wings, and then it was lifted up from the earth, and a man's heart was given to it. And that beast represented who? Or we haven't had the interpretation yet, but who are we going to say it represents?
Babylon and Nebuchadnezzar.
Babylon, specifically Nebuchadnezzar, because he was that head of gold of that original dream in Daniel chapter 2, and we made the point of how the comparison that could be made between the dreams of chapter 7 and chapter 2, and they're very they go very well with one another. They complement one another. Second beast that was in the dream was like a bear, and it's interesting that the animals that are mentioned. It wasn't a lion. It was like a lion, because lions don't have wings, and there were some things about this lion that were a little different. And this one is, it's not a bear, but it's like a bear. It would appear as a bear and look very similar, but it's not exactly a bear because it's got some different characteristics. One like shoulder, one side of the bear was elevated higher than the other side. What does that represent?
Medes
and the Persians. So the Medes kind of get the first, they get out of the gate first in the kingdom category. But very soon are going to be taken over by the Persians, and the Persians are going to end up rising to a greater magnitude. The 3 ribs in its mouth, we talked some about that. It could represent 3 specific kingdoms that Persia overtakes, or it could just represent the fact that while the bear is ingesting and eating, he's given the command to go and eat more. They had an insatiable appetite. They wanted to keep expanding and keep dominating. So kind of could go either direction there. The third beast was like a leopard. It had 4 bird wings, fowl of some kind, and it had 4 heads. And what are some things about the leopard-like creature that we noted? It's very fast, and if you think about if you remember back to your ancient history, Alexander the Great was the conqueror that kind of launched that Greek dynasty, and he took over most of the known world in a very short amount of time, and then he up and died with no viable heirs to take on after him, and so his kingdom was divided up into 4 loosely affiliated kingdoms that did not particularly play nice together, and did not particularly were not suited to be able to hang on to what Alexander the Great had conquered and accomplished. So we'll see more of that as we move into chapter 8 and future chapters as well. And then the 4th beast. What's different about the 4th beast?
It's whatever you want it to be.
It's not specified. It's just a beast, and it's interesting if you Google it, most of the drawings that people give, it's more reptilian, dragon-like, kind of whatever, and okay. So, and where did all these beasts come from, by the way? Out of the sea, which represents the humanity. It's just out of the population, out of the sea of nations. And this one comes out of the sea. It's exceedingly, I didn't say that word right. It's really dreadful. It's a terrible beast. It has iron teeth and brass nails. Whatever it can't chomp up and chew, it will stomp and destroy. So just kind of that vision there. It had 10 horns, and we talked about the 10 horns. Who do they represent? Does it represent 10 specific Roman emperors? Does it represent kind of the beginning and end of the dynasty of Rome? And how long do you even consider that to be a dynasty? Because Rome had, what did I say last week? I think we said 45 or 46 recognized emperors of the Roman Empire. And then, how do we get that to fit in? It's kind of up in the air, and I'm not going to fight anybody over it. So it somehow represents Rome, and the specifics of which are not clear, and they're not clearly interpreted for us. And so, as I was reading ahead and getting into chapter 8, this if we make it there, and as we get into it later on, there are some very specific things that the next vision. I mean, they're laid out specific, but and I wish that was the case with the 10 horns, where where we were given a more specific interpretation of what those are, but we're not. So we'll just deal with it. And then finally, what happens after these beastuses do their thing?
Fire.
There's a whole new scene, and this one is the Ancient of Days is seated upon the throne, and he's dressed in white, and there's fire, and there's isn't the throne on a wheel that rolls back and forth, and then who appears with the Ancient of Days?
The Son of Man.
The Son of Man appears there, and what's different about this representation of a kingdom? Where did the first 4 come from?
Sea.
From the sea, the population of people. And where does the Ancient of Days present the kingdom to the Son of Man? It comes from heaven, right? It descends. And so it is not an earthly kingdom. And so go back to chapter 2 and the statue and all that. You have these earthly kingdoms that are literally physically rooted to the ground by the feet of that statue. And they represent those 4 earthly kingdoms, and then that rock is cast down from heaven. It's cast down from the sky, and it comes down and destroys those 4 kingdoms, or that statue, and it represents a heavenly kingdom, a spiritual kingdom, one that will last forever. And so we have these 2 visions that in some ways are very, very different, but in some ways are very, very similar, and certainly in their interpretation of the things that they mean are very similar. So we have just a reminder of who is sovereign when you think back to what God shows Nebuchadnezzar at the beginning of the period of captivity, and now as Daniel is not super close to the end of captivity, but he is getting closer, and he's super close to the end of the Babylonian era. Babylon is about to go by the way, and the Median Empire is about to rise up, quickly followed by the Persians. So we're at a transition time, and God is showing at the beginning of the time what's going to happen later down the future. And now God is reminding Daniel, hey, something big's about to happen because we're going to have a transition in kingdoms here. And so we're one step closer to that heavenly kingdom that God is planning and promising through the visions that He's shown. So that kind of wraps up all that we talked about last week, and we still got time, so we can talk about stuff this week now. All right, you ready?
Sure.
15 through 18.
As for me, Daniel, my spirit was distressed within me, and the visions in my mind kept alarming me. I approached one of those who were standing by and began asking him the exact meaning of all this. So he told me and made known to me the interpretation of these things. These great beasts, which are 4 in number, are 4 kings who will arise from the earth. But the saints of the holy, or of the highest one, will receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, for all ages to come.
Okay, so how does Daniel feel about these visions, the vision that he has seen? Distressed, okay. And so we talked about this some along the way, when Nebuchadnezzar had his vision in chapter 2, or his dream, as he called it, how did he wake up feeling?
Anxious.
Pretty anxious, right? He's ready to kill everybody if he doesn't figure out what it's about or what it means. he's ready to start chopping heads off. And so he's pretty anxious about what this is. And we talked some all the way back then about, I've had some weird dreams and even some dreams before where I'd woken up and I thought, boy, I'd like to know if that means something or if it was just weird, but something about this experience was different for Nebuchadnezzar, and he woke up knowing this was important and this was a meaningful dream that needs to be figured out. And I think that the same here is true for Daniel, that Daniel in some way, whether it was and it's not necessarily called a dream, kind of the way that Nebuchadnezzar talked about it. This one, where Daniel saw a dream and visions in his mind as he lay on his bed. Was he asleep? Was he awake? Was he in that kind of misty part between sleep and awake? Is he fully aware of what he's seeing and thinking about as he's seeing it, or does he wake from sleep and kind of recall what has happened? I mean, it doesn't really lay that out for us, but something is different about this than your average everyday weird dream that you might have. He knows that there's something special about this. And so he leaves that dream state or that vision state anxious because he wants to know more and he wants to understand why God has shown him these things. He understands that it's not just because he ate, a bad piece of cheese before he went to bed. He knows there's something weird going on here. So what explanation is Daniel given for the four beasts?
They are four kings who will arise from the earth.
Okay. Do we suppose that Daniel is instantly, as soon as he hears that, starting to draw some connections and have some memories flood back to him from previous encounters that he's had? I mean, I would think so. This is 50 years after Nebuchadnezzar's dream, roughly, but I would imagine that he has a pretty good recall of that, a pretty good recollection of the things that happened when Nebuchadnezzar had his dream, and a pretty good memory of those things. And so as he has this dream and he starts hearing that this is a dream about kingdoms, and I've already dealt with that before. I've already made that connection. I wonder if that comforts. I wonder if that makes him start anticipating things that he might be told what it means, or if he starts, his mind starts trying to race ahead and get ahead of what it means. I can picture, well, sometimes my brain tries to race ahead. Sometimes it's pretty slow, but I can picture just some of those different scenarios about how Daniel is reacting to this as he's being told in the first few sentences what this is about. And it is always interesting to me to try to put myself in those positions and think about what he is dealing with. Johnny, did you try to flag me down a second ago? Okay. Yes, good.
My commentary has made the distinction between dream and vision. Dreams, you're asleep, visions, you're awake.
Okay. So he saw a dream and visions in his mind as he lay. So he had both. He woke from the dream state and continued in a vision state or something like that. I don't know. I'm not.
He dreamed the first half and then he woke up to have a vision of the explanation.
Yeah, and the explanation part of it is a vision. Could be. Yeah. So the four beasts represent four kings. Are we okay with the idea that when it says four kings, we can extrapolate that out into kingdoms? Does it? In verse 50, what verse is it? Well, let's see. It's a great beast. 17.
That word says 14, but down to 23,
Ah, okay.
they shall be a full kingdom of
Okay. There it is. Okay. And so, yeah, I think, so Yeah, so and I think that's a good thing to point out, that it does kind of make that transition for us in the text, where if we're talking about four kings, well, when it's, what does the leopard represent? Well, the leopard-like creature itself represents, I think, Alexander the Great, but it has 4 heads and 4 wings, representing the 4 miniature kingdoms that branch out of Alexander the Great. And so a kingdom usually starts with a king, right? And then, so that a king arises that establishes himself as the sovereign of that region or that area. And then if he's powerful enough and he's good enough, then that kingdom survives past his death. And the Greek Empire did, to some extent, survive past Alexander the Great's death, just not to the extent it would have had he lived and had he continued. So, the 4 beasts representing 4 kings entails the kingdoms that they establish, and so those kingdoms outlast the kings that the beasts represent, and that's okay. I mean, it's obviously okay. That's what's in here, but there you go. Okay, well, are we done with that section? Let's see. This is probably 4 kingdoms. Sensing, let's see, there were, here's Homer Haley writes, sensing the perplexity of the prophet, the attendant quickly spoke a word of encouragement. This is this part. Verse 18, who receives the kingdom, the final kingdom?
The saints.
But who was the kingdom given to? If we go back to, oops, I don't have that text in here. So my shoe just fell off. That's never happened before. Sorry about that. Now I'm all confused. Go back to verse 13 and 14. The Son of Man was coming and came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom. So who receives the kingdom when Daniel's watching the vision? It's the Son of Man. It's the one that the Ancient of Days presents the kingdom to. Who in the New Testament receives the kingdom? Jesus receives the kingdom, doesn't he? I mean, that's the kingdom that has been prepared from the foundation of the world. I mean, so what's with the explanation here being that the saints receive the kingdom? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Yes. When he returns, yes. Okay. So we are, I mean, in a sense, I feel like we are the kingdom that's being presented. I mean, the church is the kingdom, and the church is the body of Christ, and the church is the bride of Christ, and all of those figures in the New Testament that kind of roll into one figure, and all of those things are presented to Christ. And so, but it's a different, I mean, I don't want to make mountains out of molehills, but it's a different connotation to say that the saints are given the kingdom versus the saints are the kingdom that are given to the king. It's just encompasses everything. It's cyclical. Okay, Johnny. Okay. Be kind of a lonely kingdom if you had a kingdom without people. Okay. And it's just an interesting, it's an interesting kind of shift, and I think we see that happen sometimes in visions and dreams anyway, where things morph and things shift, and they roll into the next figure or something like that. Sam.
It says that they receive the kingdom and possess it. It talks about that. We receive the Holy Spirit, we possess it and possess the Son.
Okay. Okay, so does the church have the Spirit, or does the Spirit have the church? Yes, as Gary used to say. Do we possess the kingdom, or does the kingdom possess us? Yes. Okay. I can go with that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Before you go on, who is the he again that I approached one of those things there and asked him? Who's the him?
I'm sorry, where, I couldn't hear you.
Verse 16.
I approached one of those standing by.
I approached he talks about the holy ones.
Thousands attending him, myriads of
Yeah, the
myriads.
Son of Man, he came, it backs up, I
Verse
kept
10.
looking, verse 10, river of fire coming out before him, thousands upon thousands were attending him. Yeah, so one of the myriads of attendants, or one of the thousands upon thousands who were gathered around the throne. And again, we have also mentioned the similarity or the likeness of some of the things in Daniel as compared to Revelation. And I don't have the throne scene of Revelation chapter 4 comes to mind, where there are uncountable numbers of people around the throne. My quick update, my Bible was put in the mail today. I should have it back Monday. So I'm really anxious to get my actual Bible back. So out of in Revelation chapter 4, you're sitting like there's the first creature, there's all those creatures, the living creatures, the 24 elders. Well, maybe it's not chapter 4 I'm thinking of. Chapter 4 is where the vision starts, but it does talk about myriads and uncountable numbers of people that are gathered around the throne in the book of Revelation. And so there are similarities in the visions that Daniel has and the vision that John has. And in that vision of John in Revelation, they are asking, Lord, how long are we going to wait before we're avenged? Because they were subjects of the kingdom that had been martyred, that had lost their lives in service to the kingdom. And so, there's that relationship there between all the ones that are gathered around in the kingdom itself. So there's a tie-in there to the kingdom being made up of all of those that are gathered there as part of that throne scene. It's all very spectacular to think about. Johnny.
Back earlier when it says is the throne, plural. But only one person sits on a throne.
Where did you see that? Verse 9. I kept looking until thrones were set up. And the Ancient of Days took his seat. His throne was ablaze with flames. So I think, I guess I would interpret that as being, if we're seeing the coronation of a final kingdom, as the Ancient of Days, the Father is granting to his Son his kingdom. Well, I mean, the Father is not giving up his throne. The Father is simply instituting a new throne for his Son to sit upon. And so I think that would be the idea there, that we're seeing a cohabitation or co-regency of kings in that case.
I think part of that, not trying to tie too many prophecies together, but Revelation 4, you're talking about verse 4 in Revelation 4 says, around the throne were 24 thrones, and upon those thrones I saw 24 elders sitting.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to blend or mix too much, but that might be why there are multiple thrones there, is because it might be that there's one for the Ancient of Days, and one for the Son of Man. And the Son of Man will come and take his seat at the right hand of the Father. And, mixing that with the next metaphor that Daniel will have about the Son of Man. But it could also be the elders' thrones, but that's mixing things a little too much, I think. But there's that.
So we've seen multiple thrones in other prophetic visions. So, and it, again, I mean, as we get into, I'm most comfortable, obviously, as I think we all would be, I'm most comfortable with the things that we are told the interpretation for, and then when we get into questions where it's like, wow, I wonder what this part means, and we're not told what that means, I will again emphasize my love for speculating and thinking up possible solutions to those, but I don't want to be dogmatic about any of them. And so, unless we have a specific scripture or emphasis in scripture pointing us to a conclusion on some of those things, I'll agree with you.
It's a great hermeneutic.
I'll agree with you. And
read scripture.
as long as it doesn't go against what we have written, I'll agree with you. Okay. Okay. Well, that's fun. All right. Verses 19 to 22.
Then I desired to know the exact meaning of the fourth beast, which was different from all the others, exceedingly dreadful, with its teeth of iron, its claws of bronze, in which it crushed, devoured, and trampled down the remainder with its feet. And the meaning of the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn which came up, and before which 3 of them fell, namely, that horn which had eyes and mouth, uttering great boasts, and which was larger in appearance than its associates. I kept looking, and that horn was waging war with the saints, and overpowering them, until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was passed in favor of the saints of the highest one. And the time arrived when the saints took possession of the kingdom.
Okay, so why was Daniel especially interested in the fourth beast?
Because it's confusing.
Okay, that's probably a pretty good reason.
I think he could probably draw a comparison with the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had. The first 3, gold, silver, and bronze. I think he could kind of look at the beast, the first beast. But this fourth one was so different. It was so outlandish, explained or described. I think that
Yeah.
probably they didn't know about it.
Yeah.
But it didn't seem to fit in with the others.
I think you're right. I think it was more remarkable in appearance and in ferocity than the others, and it was least like a recognizable beast, less like a recognizable beast than the others were, which made it unique and made it fearsome and made it troublesome. Also, it being the one that is in place before some miraculous heavenly things take place, some things that are out of this world literally take place, make it, I think, of the most interest, because that is more of an identifying characteristic. It's like, okay, I'm kind of interested in what these other kingdoms are and who they represent, how long they last, and what happens with them. But there's one kingdom coming that I really want to know about, and that one that's going to end so that next one can start. I want to know how does it come about? What does it mean? How's the new kingdom going to overtake it? That's just the one that holds my interest the most. And so it's interesting. Daniel kind of asks a question. He finds a guy, whoever that is. Whoever it is that he asks. Hey, what's going on here? And he gets an answer. And then as soon as he figures out, hey, if I ask questions, I get an answer, the questions start coming, right? If you're going to help me understand this part, then I've got questions about another part. And so Daniel specifically asks about that fourth kingdom. And then, okay, so I had that question in here, actually. We've kind of already talked about it. At the end of that reading, it says once again, to whom is the kingdom delivered? To the saints. And so there again, we have a contrast, I think, between the way the kingdoms are presented. If you have each of these kingdoms, and think about the defining characteristics, the lion and its power and its might and its ferocity, and the bear with its voracious appetite and its gobbling things up, and you have this leopard that covers ground quickly, and you have this beast that's tromping and stomping and chomping on things. And then you have this final kingdom, and what does the king do? Does he claim the kingdom to like by power to take it for himself, for his own glory, for his own benefit, for his own purpose? Or what does he do? He gives that kingdom to the saints. He gives that kingdom to the subjects. What a contrast between the four earthly kingdoms and how they operate versus that spiritual kingdom and what it's designed to do. It's not designed to consume, it's designed to feed. Uh-huh. Heaven on earth, right? Yeah. Yes, I certainly try not to fault their misunderstanding too much, because I know I've got enough of my own misunderstanding to account for, and so I think you're right that there's a desire. Well, this is the way kingdoms operate. This is the way kingdoms are. Kingdoms are physical. They're earthly. They're human, and so we've been promised this great kingdom. Well, I want it to be better than the ones I've known, but it still needs to be like the ones I've known. Johnny.
This last one is also the only one that specifically says attacking the saints.
That says what?
It's attacking the saints.
It's attack. So the fourth kingdom with the terrible beast specifically says that it wages war against the saints. And I did this last week. I kind of forgot about it until just now. But the word, other than once or twice in the book of Psalms, the word saint does not appear in the Old Testament except here. This is where the word saints is at. And so we're not accustomed to referring to God's people as saints. And the word saint, is sanctified one. It's one who is set apart, one who is made holy. They're called the congregation. They're called the church. They're called the assembly. They're called God's people, His possession. All these things that we know of and are applied to the church in the New Testament. But Daniel's the only one that uses saints to apply to God's people. And so from the perspective of the one of Daniel as he's seeing this, and then later Jewish people as they're hearing this story or they're reading it, they're not applying it to a future church. They're not saying, oh, this is post-Jewish relationship with God. This is us. This is God's people. They're thinking of the word saint as applying to themselves because they're God's people. And so when Daniel hears that the saints are being persecuted, he's thinking of what's happening. Where is he at right now? He's in captivity right now. I mean, you're speaking about God's deliverance of a kingdom of persecuted people, and you're giving that dream to somebody who's living in captivity. That I would think that would be a significant cause for taking note.
You can see why there would be some that would confuse the prophet of Revelation as being a coming kingdom, an earthly kingdom. And
Right.
The saints in that term sounds like a heavenly term.
Yeah,
Instead of realizing that this is the return of the church.
yeah.
So that it's easy to see how people get that.
For sure, I think it is, yeah. I mean, there's lots that we could chase that rabbit a long ways, but I think you're certainly right that as people misapply some scriptures about prophetic things, that it snowballs very, very quickly. Tim.
When you asked the
Well, I was asking the question. Why, let's see, let's see. You've got a thought, let me see if I'm going somewhere. I mean, I would think that I don't know that it's stated specifically. And I think some of the things that we've talked about, just the proximity to the final kingdom, the ferocity of the beast and what it's doing, it makes the other kingdoms, though they were, it's one of those things where what I'm seeing is bad until something worse comes along, and now what I saw that was bad isn't so bad anymore because what I'm seeing now is worse. And it's almost like those kingdoms build that way, where once it gets to that fourth kingdom, it's like, wow, it's really, really bad, and now deliverance comes. So, I mean, just kind of that's where I was thinking. So what do you think that fourth kingdom, why he's so interested in that fourth kingdom?
Well, I think it's what all of the scripture is. It's all about Christ,
Okay,
ultimately. And I think this is just prophetically laying out what happened.
yeah, of course,
It's easy for us to see,
yeah,
with hindsight, that makes it terrible.
oh, for sure,
It just echoes of exactly what happened.
yeah,
And culminated in the Roman Empire. That's when,
for sure,
and when he said it was finished, that is the culmination.
yeah,
It is finished.
yeah,
Jesus said that, he meant it.
yeah,
I've done what needed to happen. What was said, what was prophesied, it just happened.
yeah. I think all that ties in there as well. And I do, yeah, I mean, it's interesting that we, even with hindsight, kind of look back and we're trying to put those last little puzzle pieces in. And if we get to the end, my final thing is, my final takeaway from chapter 7 is don't lose sight of what we can know while we try to figure out those little things that we can't know, because what we can know is a really, really big picture. I mean, it's really detailed big picture, but we can get focused in on some of those really tiny details and lose sight of the fact of what we do know.
Daniel had a hunch that this horrible, terrible, we call it different than terrifying beast, was going to challenge the faith. Then that would be
Yeah.
something that would really.
Yeah. Well, and as you say that, a thought comes to mind that, when Nebuchadnezzar had his vision about the tree that got chopped down and all that, and it represented him going out to live in the wilderness, what did Daniel tell Nebuchadnezzar to do? To change your ways, repent, pray. Maybe it won't happen. And so as Daniel is seeing these terrible visions of the rise and fall of kingdoms, and now he's got a kingdom that is, as this kingdom rises, it decimates God's people, it hurts God's people. Am I being shown this because it's going to happen, or am I being shown this because we have the chance to pray about it and forestall it or keep it from happening? And so, I mean, that's if we had any notion that Daniel prayed at all.
I think it's the same message that Revelation gives.
That was a joke.
The end is already declared.
Yeah,
God is gone, and the faithful will,
for sure.
even though they're going to.
Yeah, and I think big picture wise, I think absolutely for sure that the victory is declared before the war ever starts, before the battle has ever begun, and I mean that's Revelation. The most prominent word in Revelation is the Greek word Nike, which means victory. And so it's all about the victory of God's people. And so I think this here, even though there's a buildup and there's a terrible thing that's on the horizon, just past that is a better thing that's on the horizon, and that's the victory of God's people as they are given the kingdom. Again, I mean, the contrast between a beast that takes his kingdom by force versus a kingdom that is distributed to the saints, to the subjects, that's a stark contrast. And it just sweetens the picture. Good stuff. All right, verses 23 through 28.
Thus he said, the fourth beast will be a fourth kingdom, on the earth, which will be different from all the other kingdoms, and will devour the whole earth and tread it down and crush it. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings will arise, and another will arise after them, and he will be different from the previous ones and will subdue 3 kings. He will speak out against the Most High and will wear down the saints of the highest one. And he will intend to make alterations in times and in laws, and they will be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. But the court will sit for judgment, and his dominion will be taken away, annihilated, and destroyed forever. Then the sovereignty, the dominion, and the greatness of all the kingdoms under the whole heaven will be given to the people of the saints of the highest ones. His kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom, and all the dominions will serve and obey him. At this point, the revelation ended. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts were greatly alarming me, and my face grew pale, but I kept this matter to myself.
So, what are the sins of the fourth beast? Speaks out against the Most High. Persecutes the saints. Again, that word is used.
Decides what law is.
Okay. He challenges, he attempts to make alterations in times and in law. Johnny? I don't know. The Gregorian calendar is what it's called. That was some guy named Greg. Greg, you want to comment? I don't know when the calendar was finalized.
Don't quote me on this, but I went to a lecture long ago at Freed Hardeman Lectureship, so I am.
This ought to be
it's
good.
It's been a long time since I was on this, and it was about Luke, and the Gregorian calendar came about. It was like at least 150 years past the death of Christ when the calendar went, and they backtracked it because they got it wrong off of a couple of years. They didn't get the birth of Christ as BC.
As 0, yeah.
Yeah, they missed it. And so it was quite a ways removed, and it was basically just on tradition, and he was going back trying to follow the historical records, and that's why he got it wrong. But it was many, many years even into the future after Christ comes. So
yeah.
the calendar willing to be changed to what we know as the calendar for many times, but the Jewish people were counting time based on the moon rotations. That's why they have this special, couple of weeks or / month that they have to add in. Instead of leap year, they have their special extra month in one of their years. But that's some of the way that they were determining time before the Gregorian sun rotation, I guess, calendar came about, was by the moon, and so. Anyways, I don't know if that answered. That's all I remember from that lecture, though. So, it was quite a while, and they didn't have sun-based years for quite some time. They had month-based calendars based on the shapings of the moon. I think it was still moon-based. It might not have been years yet. I don't think. Well, for the Jews, I don't think it was, but I don't know. You have an interesting point. Maybe that'd be worth studying.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, and I don't know. I don't know. That's a good question. And when you got to put yourself into Daniel's position and into the position of those that are receiving this prophecy, which specifically is Daniel, but. Think about how did they mark their calendar? Well, that goes back to Exodus, and when God told them as they left captivity, today begins, this is the first day of the year for you. And that reestablished their calendar at that time, and so time was set and counted from that date. And then
Did it start at midnight?
it did not. It started at sundown, from sundown to sundown. And so, this is one of those things where we're not given the interpretation of that part of it. We're given the statement, and we'll do the best we can with it. There's a couple of statements in here that we're going to have to kind of come to that conclusion with, and come down to the, here's some thoughts on it, but I don't know that we'll come up with a specific meaning. So go ahead.
After a brief Google search, as in I clicked go, it said from the U.S. Naval Observatory Astronomical Applications Department. I don't know what that means, but it said the Julian calendar was introduced by
That'd be
Julius Caesar. So
Julius
maybe
Caesar.
it has something to do with, that when Rome comes to power, they will change the way that the solar calendar is introduced, I guess. I don't know. They might be guessing too.
Julius Caesar is some consider him the first Roman emperor. Some don't, but some do. What's that? Yeah, Brutus disagreed. He was, yeah, at two Brute. So let's enough speculating on that. Let's speculate about some other stuff. What is what's up with the horns? Okay. Which 10? It doesn't say. And so
Which 11 or 13 or whatever
well,
they get torn up or whatever.
11, because the one comes up and it supplants 10 other ones. McGuigan, let's see. So we talked about this a little bit last week. The fourth beast, let's see, the little horn is judgment. Let's see, there's, that's not it. This is it. Okay, McGuigan spends 6 pages, and his book's not that long, but it spends 6 pages on the fourth beast, considering the length of the book. Okay, let's see, the view presented by others. McGuigan's view is as follows: the 10 rulers, and he names them. Number 1 is Augustus.
Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula.
Because he's not, because he's the first emperor by the way some reckon. So Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, Nero, Galba, Otho, Vitellius, Vespasian, and Titus. The 11th horn is Domitian. There's no doubt that Domitian was of the fourth beast. Neither is there any doubt that he was the 11th emperor. That's what McGuigan says. Otho, Vitellius, and Vespasian are
I don't know if that was
Galba,
his. That
Galba,
was-
Otho, and Vitellius
That was the other guys.
were after Nero, things went south pretty quick, and then there were 3 of them that didn't last but a couple of weeks each, and so but they still are called emperors, but they ended up being subdued. And further speculation, Homer Haley said, basically says they could be symbolic. The number 10 was a favorite symbolic number, suggested a rounded total, large or small. These considerations show that the numbers are used symbolically. Let's see. There were 45 emperors from Augustus to Constantine. So, if it stands for just the Roman Empire, then 10 becomes 45. So,
Well,
who
maybe
knows?
it means that there's going to be another Roman Empire
There
that's
is
going to
not
show up, and there's
going to
gonna
be another
10
Roman
kings.
Empire. We're not going down that. My speculation ends.
Well,
Such things. All
All
right,
of my
so
resources.
What is
No.
what is important about the final kingdom? That it's delivered to the saints. It is not earth-based. It is heavenly-based. It is not originate from the sea. It originates from heaven. And here's my final thought on chapter 7. Don't lose sight of what is important while searching for the meaning of less important details, such as who the 10 kings are. I don't know who they are. I don't know that it matters. If it mattered that much, we would have been told. Johnny.
Is it 10 one of them numbers that Gary always says is
10 is completion. It's a what did Haley say? It's there are several prophetic numbers that are that have significance. 10 was a favorite symbolic number suggested of a rounded total, large or small. So it could be a big number or a little number. 10 showed power and strength, okay? And so unless you can crank it all the way up to 11, 10's as high as it'll go. That's a Spinal Tap reference.
It's amazing or interesting to me about this term that's used in different places. Times, and half a time.
Yeah, we're out of time. That's going to come up again, and I don't have anything, I really don't have much in the notes about it for this time, but it does come up in a more significant sense, I think in chapter 9, I can't remember, but it is coming up. I'm not ignoring it, I'm just putting it off, because it will be dealt with.
And we're having
Maybe-
time.
Maybe,
Then it's
maybe
done.
the Lord will return before then, and I won't have to.
Learn it straight from Daniel.